The seashore is visited by a lonely man. No other creature treads the sandy terrain with him, but a dog who greets him with a wiggling tail. The man seems to be a regular here, so we could guess that he doesn't have an easy life. Guessing isn't necessary in another main character's case, however. The story picks up with this young Iranian woman who is trying to get into her apartment together with her son, Amir Reza. After a few seconds, the commotion at the door forces neighbors to come out, and one of them takes it upon herself to break the news to Nahid. She is the wife of Nahid's landlord, and she says that her door's lock has been changed due to months of receiving zero payments. The young woman is desperate. She is trying her best to pay the rent, but there are things she's been failing to change. If the neighbor doesn't show mercy, she and her son will spend the night outside. So the woman gives her the new key and tells her to bring it back tomorrow. Despite the gloominess of their situation, Nahid's son still manages to cheer his mother up once they get into bed that night. The next morning, the son is met by his principal with an unnecessary amount of hostility. He spits out that the young man's grades are low and that he wants to see his mother. Meanwhile, Nahid checks into work. She seems to be a typewriter. From her manager, Layla, we learn that she takes her kid to a private school. This is why she fails to pay rent and often asks for her salary in advance. The kid doesn't seem to be respecting her struggles at all. However, he skips his classes and refuses to put much effort into studying. One day, after taking him to English classes, Nahid puts on a different, more colorful handkerchief secretly and walks to a hotel building by the sea. The gate is open, and she enters the main door without any trouble. This is the place where her lover, Masoud, works. At first, he's not at the hotel building, but once he comes, he meets with her in front of the crushing waves. They seem to be immersed in passionate, meaningful love that burns ever more brightly and painfully when they are apart. There is one enormous problem, however. They are hiding from society, where their relationship is deemed illegitimate. This detail bugs the man a lot. He wants to take another step further into this relationship, marry Nahid, and put an end to this annoying secrecy. And so, as her son spends some time at a hookah place in town, Nahid finds herself in front of a life-changing decision. Masoud proposes to her, gazing in hope, but his future plans are crushed in front of his eyes. This proposal causes Nahid more pain than happiness. She is forced to not only reject the offer, but to break the relationship off as well. The reason behind her decision is still unknown. That evening, after returning home, she gets annoyed with Amir Reza. The boy is engaged in playing on the phone instead of studying, and he seems to find his mother's situation funny. While he maintains a humorous attitude, Nahid gets more and more bitter. When the kid mentions the principal's request, he is smart enough to know why he was so mad at him that day. As it turns out, he knows that Nahid is hiding from him due to unpaid school payments. When the father's name appears in the mother-son argument, the conflict becomes irreversible, and Nahid kicks Amir outside. After a few minutes, he goes after him to call him back, but finds no trace of him in the hallway. Rushing downstairs, she finds him with her landlord's wife, eating apples. Once more, she is reminded to bring back the keys. The landlord comes back tomorrow. The next morning, after entrusting Amir Reza to her ex-husband Ahmed, Nahid goes downstairs and is forced to give her apartment up. It will be tough for her to find a place to sleep tonight. The situation demands quick action from her, so that morning, Nahid finds herself forgetting about morals. Going to her sister's house, where their mother has fallen into bed, she steals a golden medallion. Later that day, Masoud visits her at work. When Nahid doesn't pay attention to him in the beginning, he starts showing signs of hostility. Growing frustration seems to be making him restless, so once Nahid follows him outside, he tells her to meet him at 7. Before that happens, we learn a little more about Amir Reza's father. The man seems to be gambling on football games. Most of the bad traits that Amir has seem to be inspired by him. Once the evening comes, Nahid and Masoud go to the seashore once more. At night, Nahid goes to her landlord at the river and gives him the engagement ring, asking him to hold it for a week before she manages to pay him the rent. In exchange, she wants her keys back. Immediately, the man's stare takes on a color of mistrust. He thinks that it must be stolen, and Nahid says that his doubt is true. The next morning, she starts working for Masoud at the hotel. The man doesn't know anything about the deal Nahid made with the engagement ring, so he thinks that it was just left at home. Suddenly, even though she has clearly accepted the ring already, Nahid tells Masoud why she will have to reject his proposal again. As it turns out, after divorcing Ahmed, she gave up her right to remarry in order to get custody from him. Unfortunately for her, this is how Iranian law works. If she wants to start a new life with Masoud, she will sacrifice her custody. Masoud is extremely surprised by the news. Dissatisfied, he begins looking for solutions immediately. His family already knows about the engagement, and it cannot be called off like this. He will hire a lawyer and prove that Ahmed is addicted. Consequently, Nahid and Masoud will be able to receive custody and the right to get married as well. Sadly, Nahid isn't so sure that it will work. Ahmed knows how to get away with his addiction. In the next scene, we see a scarce moment of relief in the life of Nahid. Her friend and a co-worker, Layla, help Nahid purchase, transport, and lift a new couch. Once, after a back-breaking struggle, the friends start resting on the floor of her apartment. Nahid tells her that she will no longer work as a typewriter. As it turns out, Masoud, her future husband, doesn't want her to work at such a place anymore. When Layla becomes interested in his personality, Nahid responds honestly, saying that she loves him with all her heart. She borrows a bracelet from Layla as well. She will soon meet with Masoud's sister, and she doesn't want her to think that she has no jewelry. Surprisingly enough, Nahid uses this bracelet for a different reason. In the next scene, she takes it to her landlord and gives it to him in exchange for her ring. The man's trust is broken. He saw the couch being carried to her apartment, so he knows that Nahid has money. Rejecting to receive the bracelet, he threatens to sell the ring if she doesn't pay in a week and cycles away. But Nahid turns her attitude around by doing something even more unexpected than giving out the bracelet. As it turns out, once the landlord wanted her as his nephew's wife. So knowing this, Nahid tells him that her brother is okay with the two getting married. The young woman seems to be immersing herself deeper and deeper into a life full of lies. In the meantime, Masoud comes up with a temporary solution. He goes to a marriage officiant and asks him for a favor. He asks to conduct the marriage ceremony in as much secrecy as possible. In addition, the groom and the bride will only pretend to sign the real wedding documents. Instead, they will sign a temporary marriage certificate and renew it every month. The next morning, Ahmed drops by Nahid's apartment to take Amir to school. This time, his eyes are shining with a different light. Passionately, he pleads with Nahid to get back with him. Promising that he's been clean for a month and has been going to rehab, he stresses that their family will work like clockwork once he gets a new job. He will do everything she says, but only if she decides to reanimate their relationship. Naturally, Nahid rejects his proposition. Feeling no love for him, she has no intention to get back into that relationship. After the fake marriage, there is a big commotion that day. There, we learn that Masoud has a daughter who's younger than Amir. As it turns out, he was married once as well, but his wife sadly passed away. So far, it is very unclear how their lives are going to progress. But still, Nahid feels a breeze of a better life and looks into the future with hope. She starts living with Masoud and his daughter when a new struggle shows itself to her. She will need to figure out how to get closer to the kid. Additionally, navigating through her own lies is going to become much tougher. Now that she has two homes, she will have to tell Amir about this news very slowly and carefully, and wait until Masoud starts working with the lawyer until she can fully immerse herself in this marriage. In the next scene, Amir and Ahmed are sitting on a beach when a group of 3 men come up to them. Their leader seems to know Ahmed very well. He's here to remind him of the debt he hasn't paid and to give him a proper scare. He takes out a knife in front of the kid and threatens him to do it soon. Ahmed's only response is that he has already paid the debt. He doesn't seem to be willing to follow their order. Oppressed by the people stronger than him, he starts pouring his resentment over his son once the group walks away. Nahid meets him in front of her apartment building after a few hours. She says that she was at a friend's party, and it took longer than she expected. Going upstairs, she comes up with a number of other lies as well to satisfy Amir's growing curiosity. In this moment, while speaking about their bad financial position, she takes the first step towards sharing the truth with her son. She points out that a rich husband could save them both. Thanks to Masoud, she pays Amir's tuition and her rent all in one day. The landlord hopes to start speaking about the upcoming marriage, but Nahid tells him that her brother doesn't agree to the marriage anymore. Taking Layla's bracelet back, she apologizes to him half-heartedly and walks away. Gradually, as Nahid's life becomes more prosperous, Amir feels more and more inclined to reject his father. He doesn't want to keep going out with him. But as Nahid stresses, he's his father, and the visits shouldn't stop. One day, while being with her new family at the beach, she finds herself engaging in a childish game with Masoud. This is a rare moment of carelessness in her struggling life. Meanwhile, Ahmed and Amir are at a football match when Ahmed is suddenly jumped by a group of men. He is taken to a public toilet, where he is beaten badly while his son waits for him anxiously outside. In a minute or two, Amir notices the group of men leaving the building and walks inside to find his father. He finds him all bloodied, stirred up, and resentful. Tears come to his eyes when the kid sees his father in that state. What he doesn't see, however, is the man entering one of the cabins and getting hidden money wrapped in cellophane. After the game, Ahmed leads Amir back home with limping feet, when suddenly he notices a car owned by one of his enemies. It is distressing to see him let out all his rage, but what's even more disturbing to see is Amir, who tries to repeat his behavior. Thanks to his mathematics skills, Amir wins a game of backgammon against an experienced player in the next scene. This is the first time he has won money with his wit. One of the men in hookah notices this, and unfortunately for Amir, he decides to take it off of him by force. The little kid is... And just like his father, he finds himself limping back home with a bloodied face. Nahid is furious after seeing him like this. Enraged that her son is following in the footsteps of his father, she shows him no affection, even though this is the moment when he needs love and care the most. The next morning, we see the kid reflecting on something very important for a little while. Finally, after making a decision, he takes money from an envelope and stores it secretly beneath the carpet in the living room again. This must be the money his mother gave him for school. As it turns out, Amir has been keeping it for himself and spending it carelessly instead of giving it to the principal. That afternoon, when Nahid finally pays the school principal a visit, Amir's lie is brought to light. The mother realizes that, slowly but surely, she has completely lost control over her son. Desperation comes over her, and it fogs her mind so much that she starts seeking solitude. This is why Masoud is forced to go to her apartment in order to speak to her. Once he is let in, he learns about Amir's recent activities and proposes to go to the police. Nahid is scared that the kid will find out, and everyone will learn about her new relationship. But Masoud feels the opposite. He wants their relationship to become known to everyone. Hiding like this is dishonorable to him. Finally, as tears start coming to Nahid's eyes, she says that if her son doesn't return by 4, she will go in search of him alone. While going through this impossibly tough episode of life, her needs are stomped out by everyone around her. As if everything that has happened till now wasn't enough to make Nahid's life difficult, Masoud is seen by Amir and one of their neighbors in the next scene. Once the man goes down the stairs, the kid approaches the door and knocks. Immediately, his mother rushes outside and starts screaming at him. A few good slaps are given, and after Amir turns around and runs away, Nahid realizes that she made a mistake. She let her emotions get the better of her, and now she has to run after Amir outside. She looks for him in the streets for a long time, until she finds him on the other side of the river. The road to home is silent. That night, after Ahmed hears a bunch of lies about his son's condition, he stands up to a wedding. Before heading outside, however, he attempts to get Nahid back once more. He needs her in his life so much that he even manages to act a little romantic. But Nahid's bitterness towards him is so great that she will never be able to start a relationship with him again. 10 years of her youth were sacrificed to this man, and she has no intention to make the same mistake as before. The next morning, while she and Masoud discuss their future on the beach, Ahmed is called to a police station to answer questions about a robbery that took place in one of the houses by the beach. The officers show him videos of the robbers and ask him to identify them, but Ahmed doesn't know anyone. The tape is from the cameras that observe the entire length of the shore. Suddenly, Ahmed sees a couple walking on the beach and recognizes his ex-wife. Perhaps we should expect him to become more dangerous over the course of the rest of the story. Coming from the police station, he picks up Amir from school, and instead of taking him to his mother, he takes him to his place. As it turns out, he believes that Nahid has remarried, so he thinks it will be fair to take her child. When Nahid learns about this, she goes to him, and after a short and tense conversation, she realizes that she's cornered. Understanding that Ahmed knows about Masoud, she tells him about the temporary marriage. By law, she is still the one having custody over Amir. But Ahmed is so disgusted and humiliated that he closes the door in her face. That night, an anxious and desperate Nahid goes to Masoud. After hearing the news, the man stresses that they should take the kid from Ahmed by force. But Nahid is scared that seeing officers will make Ahmed more unpredictable and aggressive. Masoud changes his position here, trying to paint a picture in which everything will surely be fine. He points out that an irresponsible man like Ahmed will give up Amir in 2 weeks. Nahid is not so sure about that either. Fear is freezing her feet, but her gaze expresses her willingness to fight for her child, no matter what. The next morning, Ahmed goes to confront Masoud. After they exchange a few words over the sound of crashing waves, he tries to protect his crooked honor by beating him in a physical fight. but he's pushed away easily. Masoud points out for Ahmed that if he had any honor, he would give her child to Nahid and let her live in peace and happiness. That woman now has a husband, and he should not even try to go after her. Bitterness and resentment break Ahmed's voice before he walks away. He promises never to give up Amir Razat's and believes that Nahid will soon leave Masoud. The next morning, after hearing that Masoud had already sent a petition to the court with regards to custody, Nahid's inner peace is somewhat mended. Still, however, she fails to fight back the urge to see her child. Without him, she feels restless, like a criminal who's waiting for the police to show up at any minute. This is why she takes Masoud's daughter outside and, together with her, goes to pick up Amir Raza from school. Unfortunately, when the kid catches a glimpse of her, he slips away from her and dashes up into the street. The never-ending river of lies keeps flowing that evening, when Nahid lies to Masoud about where they were that morning. Very soon, the inevitable happens. Mabina, Masoud's daughter, who is going through an important life transition as well, starts doing whatever the adults around her are modeling for her. She starts manipulating and lying. The next morning, she stands outside in the rain when her father leaves and asks Nahid over and over again to take her outside. Nahid doesn't have enough money, so she tells her to get inside, but the kid gives her a hell of a resistance. Nahid puts all her efforts and energy into dragging her inside, but in the end, she is defeated. In the next scene, Masoud returns home to get something he forgot to take in the morning and finds his daughter in her room, shivering and crying from fever and fear. She tells her father that Nahid kicked her out of the house and watched her shake in the cold rain. She tells him some truths about yesterday's visit to school as well. When Nahid returns home from grocery shopping, she is confronted with the first great conflict in her new marriage. Thankfully, it is resolved calmly. Masoud believes her truth and asks her to be more honest about her school visits in the future. In the next scene, Nahid tries to speak with Ahmed's mother. Seeking womanly support and a glimpse of hope from the mother, she promises to even get back with Ahmed, but the woman remains cold and resentful. Once Nahid leaves, Ahmed scolds his mother. As it turns out, she was the one initiating the marriage, believing that it would have saved her son from the devastating effects. Coming back home, Nahid lies about where she was once more. This time, Masoud senses it immediately and decides to address it right away. If there is a problem, he wants to solve it together. Nahid doesn't admit anything, and when her temporary husband starts asking questions about the money she has spent, she refuses to give an answer. Soon, both start showing themselves as victims in this situation, so gradually the couple draw further and further away from each other. Consequently, Nahid drops the last bomb by saying that in a few days, their temporary marriage will expire, and she will leave for good. Masoud doesn't argue back. He smiles bitterly and leaves the room without saying anything. Shortly after, she tells him to terminate the process in court as well. Before exiting the house, she takes off her wedding ring and, in her mind, says goodbye to this house. She goes to court alone then and takes the petition back. This doesn't mean that she wants to surrender, though. She's doing it to fight for herself. Helplessness creeps up on her after a conversation with a fellow mother in front of the court. Fighting for herself won't be easy. The court might be dragged for years if the husband wants to give her a tough time. That afternoon, Masoud waits for her near the apartment building and urges her to use the services of his lawyer. Nahid doesn't stop having a conversation with him, and the words that she throws at him while walking away show nothing more than bitterness and despair. Once she enters the building, Masoud runs into her landlord, and after hearing him complain about the unpaid rent, he gives him the money. In the next scene, Nahid is visited by her brother, who just recently found out about everything. Furious, he dashes into her apartment and slaps her immediately for staining their family's reputation. Having done that, he screams at her to get dressed and takes her back home, where he invites Ahmed and his family for a discussion. We don't get to hear what is said between them, but we see what happens afterwards. As her brother tells her, Ahmed will probably give up the child if Nahid starts living with her family again. In this moment, everyone, even Amir, is refusing to show empathy towards Nahid. Treated like a child, she is forced to come back home and start living like a good girl. That night, when she hears her mother breathing heavily and approaching, she realizes that something is terribly wrong. There is a funeral service at their home the next day. A lot of people come to pay their condolences, including Masoud's sister, who wants to speak with Nahid. The brother meets her up front and tells her to go away. There seems to be no point in negotiating with him, so the sister decides to leave without causing further trouble. The next morning, a sudden happiness comes to Nahid. Hearing buzzing at the door, she looks over from the window and sees Ahmed bringing in Amir. Barefoot, she runs outside to embrace her son. Expressing all the love she has, she receives nothing in return, but it doesn't bring her down. Once they are all in the house, she starts preparing some dishes when Ahmed attempts to have a conversation with her. Word by word, he gets gradually more and more into her personal space to artificially revive a sense of closeness. Finally, when she can no longer tolerate him, her brother and the other members of the family hear screaming coming out of the kitchen. Some stand to check out what is happening, but Nahid's brother orders everybody to sit down and let the couple talk it out between themselves. This turns out to be a mistake, though. In only a few seconds, Ahmed comes outside the kitchen disoriented and wiggles his way outside after saying a quick goodbye. Once the family members enter the kitchen, they see Nahid with a knife in her bloodied hand. As it seems, while struggling to get away from Ahmed, an unexpected thing happens in the next scene. When guests arrive at their household, Nahid and her sister suddenly start laughing over something very simple and seemingly ordinary. It feels as if Nahid hasn't laughed in a lifetime. Feeling an urge to let this sudden, perhaps even irrational cheerfulness out of her system, she runs into a different room and, together with her sister, scratches her heart by laughing. When the brother rushes into the room, she tries to contain herself, but ultimately fails. That night, the opposite happens too. Hiding under a blanket, she watches a video of Masoud and fails to contain her tears. Her son hears her sobbing, but he doesn't go over to embrace her. The next morning, Nahid finally finishes knitting a scarf and a hat for Amir Raza, but the kid shows no interest in it. After the kid goes to school, she locks herself in her room and tries to call Masoud. When her call isn't answered, she goes outside and runs to the hotel at the beach. Unfortunately, the man is nowhere to be found. After a few minutes of searching around, she manages to run into his assistant and ask him to call Masoud. But again, the man doesn't answer. Seeing Nahid as she rocks back and forth, it is tough to determine whether she's doing it because of the cold or anxiety. She walks to the sea, then standing in front of it, immerses herself in a conversation with the raging waves. In this moment, she is perfectly in tune with the sea, and perhaps this dialogue is what helps her find her peace. When Masoud appears on the beach with her, her voice is already calm. The reunion is simple and easy. Standing together in front of the sea once more, they realize that the distance between them is gone. Masoud should tell his lawyer to resume working on the case. Nahid will never surrender again.